The European Union has banned or restricted over 1,300 cosmetic ingredients that U.S. regulators still permit on your face every morning. American brands selling in both markets maintain two separate formulas simultaneously, one built to European safety standards and one built to the lower U.S. threshold. The 9 products on this list are ones where that gap is documented in official regulatory text, peer-reviewed scientific opinions, and in some cases, active lawsuits. The 4 brands at the end voluntarily applied the stricter standard to every formula regardless of which market they sold it in. Starting at number 9, Ambi Fade Cream and Porcelana Fade Cream. Both list hydroquinone at 2% as their active skin brightening ingredient. Both retail for $8 to $12 at CVS, Walgreens, and Walmart. The EU prohibited hydroquinone from all consumer cosmetics in 2001. Not restricted, not concentration capped, prohibited entirely under Annex 2 of the EU Cosmetics Regulation. The scientific basis. Hydroquinone is classified as a potential carcinogen under chronic exposure and has demonstrated cytotoxic effects on dermal tissue in controlled studies. In the United States, the FDA permits 2% hydroquinone without a prescription in any over-the-counter cosmetic. The same compound, the same regulatory evidence evaluated in both jurisdictions. A different outcome in each. These products have been continuously sold in the U.S. market since the EU ban without reformulation, because reformulation is not required. The verdict: you are not buying a dermatologist-grade brightening solution. You are buying a compound the EU classified as unsafe for consumer use 24 years ago, sold in an unchanged formula. Number 8, Banana Boat Sport Ultra SPF 50 and Coppertone Sport. Both list homosalate as an active UV filter at 15%. These products retail for $10 to $18. In June 2021, the EU Scientific Committee on Consumer Safety published its final opinion, SCCS 16.22-20, concluding that homosalate is not safe as a UV filter at concentrations up to 10%. The SCCS initially determined only 0.5% could be considered safe in all cosmetic products. Following further industry submissions, the EU Commission adopted Commission Regulation 2022-2195, allowing homosalate up to 7.34% in face creams and pump sprays only, prohibited entirely in body spray format. The US FDA continues to permit homosalate at up to 15% in any sunscreen format, including body sprays. Edgewell Personal Care, the parent company behind Banana Boat, reformulated its EU market products to comply. The US formula continues at 15%, more than double the EU maximum in application formats the EU prohibits outright. The verdict: you are buying a UV filter at a concentration the EU's own scientific committee determined was unsafe. In the same formula, the brand nose cannot be placed on European shelves. Number 7, L'Oreal EverPure and drugstore facial cleansers containing DMDM hydantoin. DMDM hydantoin is a preservative that releases formaldehyde as it degrades in a formula. It extends product shelf life and appears in L'Oreal products including EverPure cleansers and in a range of drugstore facial cleansers and toners retailing between $8 and $18. The EU requires that any cosmetic containing formaldehyde-releasing compounds above 0.05% concentration must display the warning contains formaldehyde on the label. That disclosure requirement does not exist in the United States. In 2021, class action lawsuits were filed against L'Oreal in multiple U.S. jurisdictions, alleging DMDM hydantoin in their products caused hair loss and scalp damage. Products containing DMDM hydantoin continued to ship throughout the litigation, without the formaldehyde warning that European packaging law mandates on equivalent formulas. The verdict: you are not buying a harmless preservative. You are buying a formaldehyde-releasing compound under a name engineered to prevent recognition. Without the disclosure European law requires above a threshold your product likely exceeds. Number 6, any fragranced skincare product containing Lilial. Lilial, chemically identified as butylphenyl methylpropional, is a synthetic fragrance compound used in perfume body lotions, facial creams, and fragrance skincare products. The European Chemicals Agency added Lilial to its list of substances of very high concern in July 2021. Due to its classification as a reproductive toxicant category 1B, meaning there is presumptive evidence it causes reproductive harm. Commission Regulation EU 2021.1902 prohibited Lilial from all cosmetic products effective March 1, 2022. No restriction exists in the United States. The Fair Packaging and Labeling Act permits all fragrance compounds to be listed collectively as fragrance or parfum on U.S. labels, meaning Lilial can be present in a product you are applying to your face and is legally not required to be disclosed by name. You cannot check for it. It does not have to appear on the label. The EU removed it from every product sold on European shelves. The U.S. regulatory framework does not require you to know it is still in yours. The verdict: you are potentially buying a reproductive toxicant banned in Europe since 2022. Hidden under a single word on the ingredient list. Number 5. Leave-On moisturizers containing methylisothiazolinone. MI is a preservative used in face creams, body lotions, and leave-on serums. Commission Regulation EU 2016-1198, adopted July 22, 2016, prohibited MI in all leave-on cosmetic products in the European Union, effective February 12, 2017. The regulatory basis for this prohibition was unambiguous. The EU Scientific Committee on Consumer Safety concluded in its 2013 opinion that for leave-on cosmetic products, no safe concentrations of methylisothiazolinone for induction of contact allergy or elicitation have been adequately demonstrated. No safe concentration banned in leave-on products. The European Society of Contact Dermatitis named MI its allergen of the year in 2013. U.S. dermatology practices document equivalent contact sensitization patterns in American patients. The FDA has not prohibited MI in leave-on products. MI remains permitted in U.S. leave-on moisturizers and appears in the ingredient lists of drugstore face creams sold at Target and CVS. To verify whether your moisturizer contains it, look for methylisothiazolinone in the preservative portion of the INC list. The verdict: you are applying a preservative in a daily leave-on product that European regulators removed from all equivalent formulas 8 years ago. Number 4. SkinMedica Retinol Complex 1.0. This product retails for $100 to $120 and names its retinol concentration directly in the product title, 1.0%. In 2022, the EU Scientific Committee on Consumer Safety issued its opinion, recommending retinol concentrations in face products be capped at 0.3%, citing concerns about cumulative vitamin A toxicity. When retinol from multiple simultaneous products is absorbed through the skin in a single daily routine. EU regulations implementing this restriction entered force for new products from November 2025. The US FDA has no equivalent concentration ceiling for over-the-counter retinol. American brands sell retinol at 0.5%, 1%, and 1.5% concentrations without restriction, without concentration disclosure requirements of any kind, and without any mandatory warning on cumulative exposure from using multiple retinol-containing products simultaneously. The SCCS cumulative exposure model applies equally to American consumers using retinol serum, retinol moisturizer, and retinol eye cream in a single routine. The U.S. framework does not acknowledge this exposure pathway. The verdict: you are buying a dosage the EU has flagged as exceeding safe cumulative exposure limits. In a market where that determination requires no label change, no reformulation, and no disclosure. Number 3. Neutrogena Ultra Sheer and Coppertone Sport products containing oxybenzone. Oxybenzone, listed on labels as benzophenone 3, is the UV filter in Neutrogena Ultra Sheer SPF 50, Coppertone Sport, and numerous mass-market facial sunscreens. On March 30-31, 2021, the EU Scientific Committee on Consumer Safety published its opinion concluding that benzophenone 3 is not safe. The SCCS determined a concentration of 2.2% is safe. The EU Commission implemented this restriction under Regulation 2022-1176. The US FDA permits oxybenzone at 6%. The exact concentration the EU's scientific advisory body determined was unsafe. Hawaii banned oxybenzone from all sunscreens due to documented coral reef toxicity. Palau and Key West have adopted equivalent bans. At the federal level, no restriction. The verdict: you are applying a compound the EU's Scientific Committee concluded poses health risks. Number 2. Leave-on products containing butylated hydroxytoluene. BHT is a synthetic antioxidant preservative. It is used to prevent oxidative rancidity in creams, lotions, and lip products. It appears in the ingredient lists of some drugstore body lotions. Commission Regulation EU 2022-2195, adopted November 2022, restricted BHT in leave-on cosmetic products to a maximum of 0.8%, explicitly citing SCCS concerns about potential endocrine-disrupting properties. The EU Commission adopted the restriction after identifying this classification. The United States does not maintain an equivalent concentration ceiling for BHT in leave-on cosmetic products. BHT is permitted at concentrations the EU has limited. The verdict: you are buying a compound the EU restricted specifically due to endocrine disruption concerns in November 2022. Number 1. RefectoCil eyebrow tinting kits and dark brow dye products containing PPD. Paraphenylenediamine is the active coloring compound. Sold at Sally Beauty, professional supply stores, and Amazon at $10 to $20. The EU cosmetics regulation prohibits the use of PPD. Not a concentration restriction, a categorical prohibition on use in the periocular area. Its proximity to the eye creates a documented risk profile. Anaphylaxis, severe contact dermatitis, and periocular chemical burns that the EU determined was unacceptable for consumer self-application. The US FDA has not issued an equivalent prohibition on PPD in brow or lash tinting products. These products are sold in the US without the EU prohibition label, without the patch test sensitivity warning required in European markets for PPD-containing products, and without any consumer advisory on periocular application risk. The verdict: you are not buying a professional-grade tinting system for home use. You are applying a compound prohibited for periocular application under EU law to the skin surrounding your eyes in a market that has never determined whether that application is safe. 9 products. 9 documented regulatory gaps between what European consumers are protected from and what American consumers are still buying. The 4 brands in this section did not wait for the FDA to act on the same evidence. Number 4. Versed. Retailing between $12 and $26 at Target and Ulta. Versed voluntarily formulated its entire product line to EU ingredient standards as a documented formulation constraint, not a marketing statement. Its restricted ingredient list mirrors EU Annex II and Annex III prohibited and restricted substances. No Lilial, no MI in leave-on formulas, no DMDM hydantoin, no PPD in any product. The list is publicly accessible on the brand's website without requiring a regulatory event to prompt the disclosure. Markup runs approximately 3 to 4 times production cost. The verdict: the EU standard is the formulation floor. Number 3. ILIA Beauty. Retailing between $22 and $58. ILIA's formulation standard excludes oxybenzone, DMDM hydantoin, hydroquinone, and compounds on the EU restricted list. The brand publishes the full rationale behind its ingredient exclusions with individual citations the consumer can access. It is consistently reformulated when new EU restrictions have been issued, rather than maintaining the US legal formula until compelled to change. Its EcoCert certification applies the EU cosmetics regulation as its baseline safety standard. Markup runs approximately 3 to 4 times production cost. The verdict: the EU restriction is incorporated at the formulation stage, not evaluated after the FDA acts. Number 2. Beautycounter. Retailing between $25 and $95. Beautycounter's Never list restricts over 1,800 ingredients from use in any product across every market it sells into. The list explicitly tracks EU Annex II prohibited substances and Annex III restricted substances, alongside compounds not yet formally regulated in either jurisdiction, but flagged in peer-reviewed literature. The brand testified before the U.S. Congress on cosmetic safety reform and supported the passage of the Modernization of Cosmetics Regulation Act, the first major FDA cosmetics legislation since 1938. It does not maintain separate U.S. and EU formulas because its domestic formulation standard already meets or exceeds the EU threshold. Markup runs 3 to 5 times production cost. The verdict: the formulation standard was built before the regulatory requirement existed. Number 1. True Botanicals. Retailing between $38 and $120. True Botanicals holds Made Safe certification, a third-party standard that screens every ingredient. against documented human toxicants, reproductive toxicants, endocrine disruptors, and environmental hazards, using the EU cosmetics regulation as a baseline alongside additional independent research databases. Every production batch is independently tested before sale. No Lilial, no homosalate above EU thresholds. No MI in any formula, no BHT in leave-on products. The certification requires annual renewal with updated ingredient screening, meaning the standard is applied forward as evidence accumulates, not backward after a regulatory event forces reformulation. Markup runs 4 to 5 times production cost, reflecting third-party testing investment and EU standard ingredient sourcing. The verdict? The formulation is audited against the EU restricted list before every production run, not after the previous formula becomes untenable. The United States restricts 11 cosmetic ingredients. The European Union restricts over 1,300. That gap is not a difference in available science. The same SCCS opinions, ECHE classifications, and reproductive toxicity data that drove EU regulatory action are accessible to US regulators. The gap is a difference in who has acted on that data. The 9 products on this list are sold legally in America and banned or materially restricted in Europe, using the same manufacturer's knowledge of the same regulatory evidence. The 4 brands in the Worth It section demonstrate that the EU standard is achievable at commercial price points. Without waiting for the FDA to close that gap, read the ingredient list before you read the brand claim. The jurisdiction your product was built to satisfy is printed nowhere on the label.